So, who are you? And what's that weird thing on your face? That's what people say to me.
I'm just looking at my peripheral vision. No, I'm Mark Johnson. I'm the CEO of Zeit, and yes, these are indeed Google Glass.
And Zeit is a great news aggregator. You for CNN or no? That was the other guys. I forget who sold to who.
We did just sell to CNN. So some days I'm Mark Johnson, CEO of Zeit. Other days I'm Mark Johnson, VP, who sits on the CNN digital management team. So I kind of straddle both.
So and you have Google Glass, and I think that's why we started talking. We were like, well, we know what a news aggregator is, an RSS feed reader, and Google Reader took themselves out of the game and give a few users to everybody. But this Glass thing is really changing how we get news, I think. And so I've been getting around and talking to people like the future of advertising, and I wanted to talk about the future of news. What are you seeing happen with this?
Absolutely. So I got these a few weeks ago, and for me it was one of those things where, okay, well, this is cool. I'm excited to be invited. And then after a few days, I realized I had stepped into this revolution. Like the only time I've ever seen this before was the first time I saw Mosaic running on an actual computer. Yeah. Like when I saw the early days of the web. And the world is going to be overlaid with information. We're going to be bombarded with information. And to me, the question is, how do we filter that? And so I started thinking about what is the Zeit experience on Glass. So what's cool about Zeit is we have this really intelligent technology behind everything. We look at millions of articles a day. We figure out what you like. We have 40,000 categories. So all this is really cool, but then how do you apply that to alerts, right? You were just talking about like your Twitter feed. Like you've hand-selected 20 people that are going to be really good on your Google Glass. Yeah. But what about those other 1,000, 10,000 people that you might want to see that have an alert that's really interesting to you right now for whatever reason, because you're in New York City, because you are doing something specific at a conference, whatever it is. Yeah. How do we get smart about that? And that's why I want to explore what Zeit can do on Google Glass.
Yeah, yesterday I was at the Grow conference and everybody was using the hashtag GrowConf, which my 20 people weren't there. So I wasn't seeing very many GrowConf things in my Glass, and I had no way to tell Twitter, hey, for the next couple hours, show me this hashtag, right? Don't show it to me forever because I don't care next week. But right when I'm at the conference, I want to see all the tweets, right? And there's no way to do that.
Yeah, well, so I think discovery hasn't really come into its own yet, right? Yeah. We still live in a search world, and we in the discovery space have been talking about discovery for so long. I think that it kind of waits for its killer application. And Zeit has been really cool, right? Like, I think it's really nice to filter down your news and to subscribe to technology rather than to subscribe to lots of different things. On the other hand, I feel like this is where discovery is going to be important because I see a world in 5 years where everything is overlaid with information. Menus, people, everything. The challenge is Glass going to be smart enough to know when there's going to be information out there that I care about? And, I think news is a good way to start that, right? Alerts are a good way to start this. So one of the things we've been planning at Zeit right now is, what does this world look like? Can we do smart alerts? It turns out that whenever a volcano erupts just a little bit in this world, I really care about it. Most people don't care about it. Most people aren't budding volcanologists, but I am. And can you be smart enough to know that Mark Johnson really likes volcanoes and he wants to know whenever a volcano is exploding?
And Google has the data.
Yes.
Right? Because Google knows you've done a ton of volcano searches and you probably have clicked on a lot of Google News alerts about volcanoes and you interacted with Google that way. And you've probably done some Google searches here about volcanoes, right, on the Glass. But it doesn't have any way to take that and give you just volcano data, right?
For sure. The delivery method isn't quite there yet. Yeah. But I think furthermore, dude, this is core science, right? The science behind search is really well understood at this point. I mean, if you wanted to go build a new search engine from scratch today, you take open source software and you take essentially open source papers that are out there and learn how to build a search engine, and with enough people and enough money, you can do it. Discovery is not quite like that. The core papers haven't even really been written, and I agree with you, sort of from from kind of the naive perspective, yes, all the data is out there, but how do you make sure that it's going to give me volcano data, but not all the other searches? Like, I probably did a lot of searches on Google Glass recently, and it's really interesting to me right now. Is it going to be interesting to me in a year? I don't know. And I think those are the kinds of things that there still needs to be a lot of science done on that, again, so we're not inundated with information.
So what we're really talking about is contextual systems, contextual computing, because and I was just reading Thad Starner's 1991 thesis paper last night. In fact, I went back and reread it because I'm writing a book on this stuff. And he's the guy who really is the father of the Google Glass. And back in 1991, he was talking about this. So it's taken 20 years for this field to really evolve to the place where we can really taste it. We can taste it coming, you know?
Negroponte talked about the Daily Me in 1984, I think it was, right? I mean, I think that one of the really interesting things about computing in general is that sometimes you can see the future, but it takes decades sometimes for the future to get there. Yeah. And I think that we're coming to the point where context is going to be all around us. You know, we are all going to have watches that are smart. We are all going to have these. We already have these. Yeah. And
in fact, last night somebody put a sleep monitor on me that the president's pilots wear. And it tells them whether they've had enough sleep to fly the president around, right? And it's pretty mind-blowing just from a sensor that you can get that kind of data and that kind of context.
It is amazing. I was with my godparents in San Jose a few weeks ago, and they were showing me their sleep sensors and like how it monitors their sleep. And, you know, he's having some health problems right now. And I just found it fascinating that like this technology has really sort of gone global. And the question is, right now I feel like an outcast sometimes when I wear these. You know, people are either interested in what's going on, scared of you, or kind of think that you're being pretentious. But really, this is the future here. Everybody's going to have these someday. Yeah, the question is, when does that happen?
Well, I assume that let's play a what if. If this is $300, and it might even be $200. It depends how aggressive Larry Page gets, and he's been fairly aggressive with hardware pricing. A Chromecast is $35. That's not a lot of profit margin, right? It's not like Apple with the 30% profit margins that they've had. He sells the Chrome notebook, the tablet. The Chrome 7. The Nexus 7 tablet for $199, which is pretty much what it costs to build it. And Google has set a thing of not making a lot of money on the hardware because they have a business model of advertising and showing you information and doing things that can monetize beyond just selling you the hardware, right? Apple has to pretty much monetize you on the hardware right now. So
I agree with you. I think what we're going to learn in the next year is what is the price point that everybody sets things at. Like, find the iWatch, if it ever comes out, is probably going to be set at a pretty high price point, but still at a price point that fanboys will still buy it. The real question is,
I think this has to be $300 or $200. I think in a dream it would be $199 because that'll be really aggressive and it'll keep other companies from making profit in this world. It'll sell a lot. Google, if they are able to sell this to even 5%, everybody is becoming a Google an owned property of Google almost, which is scary to think about. But
that is scary to think of. I try not to think that far in the future because I hope that I like to think there's going to be competition. But I agree with you at the $199 price point. You imagine that a lot of people are going to get it. I think there are practical concerns like you're a glasses wearer, I'm a glasses wearer. Yeah. I don't like wearing contacts, and yet for the past 3 weeks I've suffered through contacts every day, and like that's just like a practical concern. I think there's also a real practical concern is just the fashion concern. I mean, let's face it, like, you have to wear these things 24/7. They look a little bit Geordie LaForge right now. And, I love the guy, but I don't want to look like him 24/7. I don't necessarily want blue.
He doesn't even, by the way, I tried to get him to wear a Google Glass, and he's like, first of all, I'm going to get paid by Google to do that, because that'll be a big PR event,
Of course. But yeah, I mean, I think there's sort of these practical concerns that I think that it's not just a pricing concern, and those might sound trite, but actually I think to get to the large consumer market, I mean, that's a lot of what Apple did to get things like the smartphone into everybody's hands, like the iPad iPod into everybody's hands. I mean, it's not like we didn't have MP3 players before the iPod. They just made it so much more practical in the marketplace. So I think that that's one thing that Google actually is not really good at right now, that they're going to have to learn a lot about. And I hope that part of the feedback that they're gathering from Google Glass users isn't just, us futurists who are excited about, the science that we can do on all the new data, but sort of the practical, just, quirks about owning Google Glass and using them every day.
They are, by the way, I don't know if you started seeing the team members, they're wearing different kinds of frames with different kinds of lenses. And so they are working on prescription lens versions for the release date, which I assume they're going to announce this at the Mobile World Congress in February, end of February, something like that. And they'll ship it. They have to ship before Google I/O. If they don't have
absolutely.
If they don't have this done by Google, and I've told the team this, if they don't ship by Google I/O, they are going to see a real disbelief in Google's ability to get things done, and I think they really know that. So
I think Google should buy Warby Parker.
Yeah.
That seems logical, right? At this point, like, if this is really, where computing is going to happen, maybe they should consider a little strategic partnership there.
Well, we also don't know if they're going to license this OS to other manufacturers, right? And there will be competitors. I know Recon Technologies is building wearable computers for Oakley and Smith Micro and themselves. They have a Jet sunglass that has a heads-up display in it. For sports people. So there's going to be competitors, and we're wondering, is this going to be an OS that we can market, right?
I think this is my real question, right? Like, I've got a Swatch on right now.
Yeah.
This is a pretty dumb watch. But it tells the time. And my question is...
You got to get a Pebble, man.
I know.
It also tells the time.
I just ordered one of those today. I have so many wearable devices coming to my house at this point. Like, actually, things just show up at my house. But the question is, can you make the watch interesting enough that you don't need this? And
I don't think so.
I'm still on the fence there.
I don't think so.
I mean,
I don't think so for a whole lot of reasons. And let's talk about the sensors here. And
sure.
Let's get back to Zeit. Because,
sure, sorry.
No, but we're talking about contextual systems.
Yes.
What Zeit of the future, let's say 5 years from now, really needs is you need to understand the context of the user. Not just where they are, right? Because that is a little bit important. But are they in a meeting? Are they in a conversation? Are they shopping? Are they running? Are they skiing? Are they driving? Are they sitting on a beach somewhere? Are they in a place where they're open to getting news? Et cetera, et cetera. And how open are they? And you can start thinking about a world where you can build a system like that. I know Google's working on an OS, a contextual OS, that's not in here yet. I think it'll be version 2. In fact, I've heard that from the team. So version 2 of this, another 18 months. So this comes out in April. Another 18 months, there'll be a version 2 with a contextual OS that'll report to developers like you, is the user shopping, skiing, walking, running, driving, all that, right?
That's
or
awesome.
In a meeting, right? And are they clicking on? Are they wanting to click on news? And
right. Like if I'm in a meeting, my news consumption habits are like, I want to only know really important stuff because I'm in a meeting. I think this is so. There's a few initiatives we've got at Zeit right now that look like they could just be kind of boring run-of-the-mill things. Like we're looking at social right now.
Yeah.
And part of why we want to look at social is not just because it's important what your friends are reading, but understanding your context with respect to your friends is a really tough problem that I don't think anybody has fully solved yet.
Nope.
Facebook
has a team working. I met with the newsfeed team. They're working on it. You're working on it. Other people are working on this, right?
But no one's figured it out yet.
No.
And that's what's really cool. And we're also, like, on the roadmap, we've got a placeholder for Zeit Local. And what does Zeit Local really mean? It doesn't mean necessarily that we're going to, as you're walking down the street, tell you a restaurant recommendation. It means that, again, there's this graph of local businesses, there's this graph of localities.
That gets back to why glasses and not watch. This is the first consumer electronics device that knows where you're aiming, right?
That's
knows
true.
that full time. It knows that full time. The sensors are firing right now and knows that you're aiming at me. It's also the first consumer electronics device that has a little eye sensor up here that's watching your pupil and can see where you're looking. So 2 new variables of contextual information are going to get turned on next year on this device. You can't do that on a watch. There's no eye sensor. There's no way to tell which way you're aiming. You can sort of fake it because you know the arm is sort of in one direction. But this is exact. So
Yes.
think about when you're walking through a mall and you're hungry, you can ask it, okay, show me the Italian restaurant ahead of me on my walk home. And that could be potentially done in the next couple of years, right?
And it's a strong argument insofar as, I mean, you know, your eyes are a window into your brain, and I think you're exactly correct. Your eyes are a window into what you're focusing on, which I think is really a key insight that you just had there. That
they just got a patent that the patent explains how they're going to turn on the camera, take a picture, and then watch where you look inside that picture and heat map that picture and do something with that. So you can tell, like, I'm looking at a menu, they can tell what things you like on that menu because of
Right.
where your eye focuses. And by the way, your eye, when you get excited, your eye changes its size, right? So it can measure the pupil size. So if you're looking at something or a brand, it can know how excited you are about that brand and how good the affinity you are with that brand. Or if you're reading news, your eye, if something really surprising comes in your glass, your eye will get bigger, right?
So-
we haven't even started
wow.
thinking about this future, right?
Well, I mean, I was arguing with someone who was trying to make a better calendar the other day, and I said one of the biggest challenges to them making a better calendar was getting someone to put everything in their calendar, right? Like it's one thing to know kind of what I'm doing at work, but you also want to know I'm taking a hike, I'm having dinner with friends, I'm going out shopping. Those are the kinds of things I don't block out on my calendar on a Saturday and tell you that I'm doing. And if there's a potential for this to understand that I'm in that context, which is a much different context than work, and you know there are retail implications when I'm at the mall, right?
I'm not religious anymore, but I used to go to church, and I went to the same church, same location. It knows where you are.
Yep.
And went at the same time every Sunday, right? And so as soon as you walk through the geofence of that church, Google knows that's a church, right? It knows every location in the world already, and it's already built a database of airports, of shopping malls, churches, schools, gas stations. It knows when you cross those geofences what you're probably there for, right?
Okay, Glass, take the Eucharist. We'll see if the Pope blesses that. No, there's something there, right? There's something about like. You know, about understanding this context based on where you are, what you're doing, and what I think your insight was really what you're seeing, right? Is like, what are you focusing on right now? I mean, even in church, it might be the case that you're, you know, sitting back in the pews and reading your Kindle and reading a book right then, which is, you know, that's an added layer onto your context. Like, church is kind of where you're at, but reading on the Kindle is what you're doing.
If these systems, like Zeit knows my context, my behavior through life. For instance, if I'm Catholic and I go to church every Sunday, and let's say I go to Rome for the first time, my experience and what I want to do will probably be very different from an atheist who's just there to appreciate the art and the architecture and the culture. And the glass can tell me that and lead me to experiences that are very different, even though we're in the same place.
Absolutely. This is why I think news discovery is such a great area to start to build a discovery engine, because news, when it's looked at in its fullest form, is really about your Twitter feed, your Facebook feed, your CNN feed, your Zeit feed, all these different feeds. It's kind of how you consume. It's basically how you consume information every day. And when you start expanding that out, you start thinking about what is it when you apply it to local things? What is it when you apply it to social things? I think that's when it becomes really interesting, and that's when the discovery engine finally blossoms out of this old world of 10 blue links.
By the way, if we were going to Rome on vacation, let's say, Google knows that, right? Knows it months before you go. Why? Because you did some searches about Rome. That's weird, right? Most Americans don't even have a passport. Why would they search about Rome? Then, United Airlines got a ticket and put it in my Gmail. And the Google system can see, they're going to Rome. And then I put it on my calendar, right? And say vacation in Rome and block it out so nobody tries to put a meeting there, right?
Right.
And then I start doing very specific searches for restaurants and tourist places and experiences that I want to have, tour guides, stuff like that, right?
I mean, what you're asking is when is push going to turn into when is pull going to turn into push, right? Right now, our experience with technology, with information, is almost always pull. I mean, even when you add 20 people to your Google Glass for Twitter, that's still really a pull experience. It's not really pushing you things. And you probably are also old enough to remember Pointcast and push technology, and yet again an example of a technology that was way before its time. There wasn't enough information online back then, and we didn't really have the technologies or the context around it to figure out what to push you.
Well, and it wasn't open enough to control it. That's why I uninstalled Pointcast, not because it was slow or dorky, but because I couldn't show you the article that I just read. And there was no URLs, there was no copy and paste. They turned off copy and paste. In fact, you couldn't even select the text. It really pissed me off. And I think that's why the web won, because the web was sort of like Pointcast. It wasn't as pretty, but it was sort of like Pointcast, but it was open. I could grab a URL to a specific thing and share it with you. And that's really hard to do with Glass. Although I find I'm retweeting things all the time in Glass because it shows me something interesting, like Jeff Bezos buying the Washington Post. Oh, that's interesting. And I retweet it and share it with all my followers, right?
Yeah, they've definitely made the friction extremely low and given you extremely few actions you can take, which actually is kind of nice, right? It turns out that I don't need to do a million different things with any given tweet, text message, whatever. It's just, there's usually just a few actions, and sometimes it's the simplicity of the interface that promotes the best usage. So see what happens.
I just saw an augmented reality company. I forget the name. I'm bad with names, but they can look at like the floor and build instantly a 3D mesh of the floor. Now that sounds sort of stupid because you can just play a little game here. What if you walk into a football stadium and it meshes the football stadium, which is a fingerprint, and it says, oh, you're in the Seattle Mariners stadium. Oh, and then it goes out to the web and says, oh, there's a game today versus the San Francisco Giants. Oh, what time is it? What inning? There's data feeds, right?
Time for beer.
Well, that's the commercial aspect. I'm talking about the information aspect,
right,
where Zeit could go, because when I'm watching a baseball game, I want Zeit to bring me news about what I'm looking at, and what I'm watching and what I'm experiencing, and bring me a little bit outside, if it's really, really important. But mostly I'm there to enjoy the baseball game. Do you think your databases are ready for that world to deliver that kind of real-time, very targeted, because this thing knows where you're looking, but you probably don't have the data set up, right?
I to a certain extent we do. I mean, I think that certainly we've got the news feeds coming in. That's why we look at stuff like social, right? Because really,
but is there metadata around the news feed that tells it precisely where that story is about, and is it in real time? So when I'm looking at a baseball player, it shows me what his latest stats are and stuff like that.
See, so that world, I think, is many, many years beyond. I mean, sure, okay, we can from a news database, we can show you kind of the latest things. I think even when we augment that with social data, especially as you consider social kind of augmented news, certainly we could take that data and show you interesting tweets about what's going on from people in the know. When you start talking about getting data about the players, I mean, wouldn't that be amazing if you're looking on the field, it sees the guy's number, and it knows to show you all of the stats right on the side so you can look really smart with your friends. I mean, I think that world's a little further beyond what we can do right now. But what's funny is that data all exists out there. I mean, when you talk about Google knowing everything, I mean, that data exists in Google's copy of the web somewhere. The question is, can you access that in a really fast and efficient way when you need it? Yeah. And I mean, that is the promise of discovery, really. I mean, that's when search is taken to the next level. And people, I think, never really believed me when I said that discovery is the next generation of search. Discovery is the other side of the coin. Discovery is where search is going. But when you get to something like this, you realize that you don't want to OK Glass, search for a baseball player, give me his stats. You want that information right there. Yeah. And you want it to know that you're looking at him. You want it to know that you are a stats guy or a news guy. Some people want to see all the stats about someone. Other people want to see, tell me about what's going on in the tabloids right now.
Yeah.
I mean, those are two different people, right?
But on the Twitter feeds about, show me his tweet that he just made in the dugout, right?
Now you got three different types of people, right? And we need to differentiate among all three types of people and give them the information they've got right now. tough problem and a really cool one to solve. So I'm looking forward to kind of,
Sounds like you're going to have a job for at least a decade.
Heck yeah, and what's funny about that is that I wrote about the death of the search engine because I worked for a bunch of failed search startups.
Which ones?
I worked for, well, I guess they didn't really fail in the end. I worked for Sidestep, which is a travel search engine. I worked for Cosmix, which originally was a categorized search engine. And then I worked for PowerSet, which is a natural language search engine.
Yeah.
And then I worked for Bing through PowerSet. So I worked for the series of search engines, and I was really worried because it was clear to me that Google was taking over search. And I was like, okay, I've become this search guy. What's next? And then I kind of, I found Zeit, landed into Zeit, and I realized search is just beginning, right? When search is done, when you think about it, as a copy of the web and delivering someone a web page with 10 blue links, that problem is solved. But there's so many more problems in search. The problem is when people used to say that, no one knew what they meant, right? It's like, oh, search is just beginning. Okay, well, what's next? It's when you start to deliver a device like this, where you want information everywhere, you realize that organizing all the world's information, we've taken that first step. We've gotten a big copy of all the world's information. Now the question is, can you mine that information and deliver it to someone at the right place, at the right time, in the right context? And that is what I'm going to work on for the next 10 years.
That's awesome.
I'm excited now.
No, that's awesome because it's what I want in the glass. Is I just want to walk around and it serves me, right? And if I'm your assistant, and I follow you around 24 hours a day, I'm going to bring you certain things at certain times of the day, right? And that's search, but it's a weird kind of search, and it's a weird kind of discovery. We don't even really have a good vocabulary for what that is yet.
I don't think we do either. I mean, I was just thinking it's weird how a device drives what kind of information goes onto that device. It drives what kind of research the scientists do behind it, the data scientists do, as to what we're going to deliver you. And I guess that's the promise I saw when I first put these on, is like, I really see a world. There's no information out there right now, just like there was no information on the web when I first went to the web, but I know it's going to be out there, and the real question is, can I get that to you? Like, I wonder, there's a tree out there. Do I know what kind of tree that is? I'm kind of a geek about that stuff. I would love to know that, and I wish Glass knew that I knew that. So, I hope within 5 years that's going to happen.
I think it might. Maybe 10 years for the tree, but
yeah.
but certainly for the coffee shop. That'll happen in the next 2, if it hasn't already happened. In Glass, it's there, but it's really hard to pull it out sometimes,
I was really happy. On the way here, I needed coffee, and I said, okay, Glass, coffee, Half Moon Bay, and it actually got me directions immediately to a nice little coffee shop in Half Moon Bay that wasn't a Starbucks or a Pete's.
Yeah.
So that was kind of nice, and like, when it works, you're like, heck, this thing is really smart. But then you get the taste of it. You want so much more.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's true. And that's the advantage of being an early adopter with these on. I've worn it for 4 months now, and I want to talk to it and just tell it what I want. Coffee, get me coffee, and I want it to know what kind of coffee, what my usual, Should it bring me Pete's? Should it bring me the independent guy? Should it bring me a Starbucks? It knows which one I would choose.
Exactly.
After studying me again, if I was your assistant and I was following you around 24 hours a day, I would know which one you want.
Heck, do I have the Starbucks app installed on here? I mean, whether I'm a frequent Starbucks user. Hell, you should be able to have the coffee ready when I get there, right? I mean, if I'm headed off to a Starbucks.
Somebody made this point on Facebook the other day. That a lot of times you don't have a choice, right? You live in a community that only has a Starbucks, and then you go to Seattle, and you don't want to go to Starbucks in Seattle. Although the Starbucks up there is, it's historic because the first one's there. So there's
a reason. Go to Pike's Place, yeah.
Pike's Place, and the one, is it in Medina? Anyways, there's one that Howard Schultz goes to, and that's an ultimate Starbucks. It's like a luxury Starbucks. But to tell you the truth, the best coffee is at probably an independent place, and you have to know which one to go to. As an assistant, I would know, right? If I followed you around and I was paid by you to really make your life better, I would know. And this is giving you a taste of that kind of experience of having an assistant around with you, but it's only a little taste.
Well, it's not like Siri, right? Like, Siri fails so often that it became a joke. And like this is the challenge with any of these categories is I think consumers see them fail and they assume they're always going to fail. But the reality is we're just going to keep trying until we get Siri right. And that eventually you're going to be able to speak to your phone and it's going to get a lot smarter. I think the real question...
The Moto X I got, and I can already speak to it. I can say, okay, Google now, and it turns on, and I can say, where's the Starbucks in Half Moon Bay, and it gives me an answer and takes me right there, right? It's already pretty good at that. But you're right, it still has lots of potholes.
When's it going to speak to you, right? I mean, this is pull and push, right?
Yeah.
And I think that we're much better just technologically at pull.
There's a company called Tap and Go that I just interviewed that does speak to you, but only for college students. So you get up in the morning and you walk out your dorm room, and you cross the geofence. And it probably knows where you're going because it's Tuesday morning. You're going to go to History 101 like you do every Tuesday morning because that's your schedule, right? And it's going to go, hey, do you want your usual coffee? It'll speak to you. Do you want your usual coffee? Yeah. And it'll say, go pick it up. And you just go pick it up at your coffee place. It's all already built. It's in 25 campuses this fall.
That's pretty cool.
And that's a taste of what's coming with Google Glass. Now, I think that's going to be a $10 billion business in 5-6 years, something like that, right? Because everybody's going to want that. I don't want to wait in line at Starbucks. If I'm getting paid, I don't know, $50 an hour, and I have to wait for 20 minutes in line to buy a coffee, give me a break. Make that not happen.
Absolutely. Well, and I think that going to the students is a really smart idea. I mean, maybe I would have been a better Stanford student had I had that. But I don't know. I think that it's like finding the markets that are going to really adopt this early on is one of the big challenges. Like this is one of those typical problems with a technology company that sees like the top of the mountain that you're going to climb to. It's not as the crow flies like straight up the mountain. You're meandering up the mountain, and I think this is one of always the problems with technology companies is like what's the next waypoint that I can actually get to where I can continue to get funding to actually get to the top. That's what I always wonder.
We haven't talked about news creation because like the airplane crash that happened in SFO, CNN really cares about this, right?
Absolutely.
A friend of mine on Facebook was on the plane that crashed, right? David Ewan, who works for Samsung. So I had a Facebook friend who was on the plane with his Samsung phone. So what's going to happen when everybody has Google Glass? And hey, sometimes somebody's going to capture something that's interesting to CNN. Can we call CNN up with our Google Glass and push news right to Zeit, a live video feed?
Absolutely. So CNN is already on here. One of the things you can do is iReport. And I think that part of what you're saying is one of the challenges on a phone is you have barriers in between applications. You have to remember that you're taking video. I need to go to my CNN app. I need to log into iReport. One of the neat things about this is how integrated everything is so far. It doesn't feel like you have apps yet, right? And maybe that's a good thing, is that all these things are so disparate. It's like really you want to say, okay, Glass, this is news. Okay, then Glass kind of figures out, okay, you are a CNN user, you use iReport. Okay, if this is news and this is a video that's important, push it out to my Twitter, my Facebook, and to iReport. And I think that kind of behind the scenes app integration could be one of the things that makes this a really great news gathering device. I mean, it's also great because it's first person perspective. It's like not only do I shoot a video, I'm shooting a video all the time, and I can be talking through it. I could be narrating what's going on. Okay, my God, now I see some smoke coming out here. I'm going to be crawling out. Like, you can really give a story to this. And I mean, what is news telling? News telling is not just, showing someone pictures. It's telling a narrative. So I think that this has the potential to really change the way citizen journalism works. Yeah. And we've said that for years with lots of different devices, but the question is when is it going to come into people's hands? And perhaps it's not their hands, perhaps it's on their face.
Well, we have another entrepreneur sitting behind me who who are you?
Yeah, g'day. So my name's Jack Hurley, and I'm the designer of the Gyromatic Go2X.
Yeah. So you're another. I'm going to do a separate interview with you because you're in the hardware revolution that's happening right now. You're able to build these things and prototype them because of 3D printing and new low-cost computing and new low-cost motors. You're really building a robot there that's controllable. There's a little motor in there, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, 3D printing, we've had probably nearly 60 iterations of this device here, mainly around the calibration side on getting the weight right as far as so the camera doesn't topple, and making the motors work a lot easier. So yeah, there's two actually motors. This is a 2-axis gimbal, so in both roll and pitch, and so it's all about keeping cameras stable, doing epic video.
This is about $1,200 retail.
Yeah, well, the Pro model will be around the $1,200 mark. The Pro model's able to roll and pitch and do other things with the device. Our standard model will be under $1,000, which will really suit the action skateboarder, snow, the snow guys, as far as being able to hold.
Well, and the journalists, and I'm going to come back to CNN.
Yeah, so the way we look at the journalist market is we're looking at being able to supply a device like this for guys in the field, so they can actually do everything themselves. Yeah. So being able to have access to audio from good quality cameras, whether it be the GoPro or a Blackmagic cinema camera, and then being able to do a quality interview with stability, audio, and then also the future of how do we get the video out. So we're looking at ideas of maybe running, there might be a SIM card in here or something like that in real time to be able to push data, and the rig becomes the whole unit. So that's really interesting, because that coming back, because this company is called Gyromatic. Gyromatic, yep. And we've been in the stabilisation game for a fair few years now with stemmed out of the helicopter businesses. So, yeah.
That's cool. I want one.
I know. I keep waiting for the camera to turn, and it doesn't. Unless you want it to. It's so amazing.
Well, I was talking to GoPro's head of user experience the other day, and because I wrote a post a week ago saying, "Oh, GoPro is going to get disrupted by glass," and I think it will be for first person, for on the head kinds of video. This just makes a lot more sense. You can turn it on with voice.
Yep.
But they said you're looking at it wrong, man. Every journalist is going to have 15 cameras around them,
right.
and every skier is going to have, a camera on their ski tip, a camera on their head, camera on their chest, camera on their knee, camera on their ski pole, and you're going to have like 5 cameras. How are you going to control those 5 cameras? That's Glass's job. You're gonna say, okay, Glass, turn on my GoPros, and they're all gonna fire on, right? Because they're all Wi-Fi and Bluetooth enabled. And you're gonna say, okay, Glass, show me camera 1. Okay, Glass, show me GoPro 5. Okay, Glass, show me GoPro 3. And you're gonna see the video in your eye off the cameras that are around you, so you can build a new kind of journalism. I think that's a really exciting way to look at the world,
I mean, you get this sort of
Internet of Things world of journalism,
It is crazy. I mean, you think of the spectrum of journalism. You've got citizen journalism, you have sort of semi-pro journalism, and then you have professional journalism. We always talk about citizen journalism and how phones affect that, how cameras affect that. But really, you walk through a CNN studio now, or you watch a camera crew operating, it looks way different than it did 5 years ago. I mean, now we're using a camera that you can go buy at the store to shoot video, and imagine the GoPros on someone who's running through a war zone in Egypt. That really changes how you can report, because suddenly you don't look like a journalist anymore with a camera crew running behind you. You are your camera crew. And people, maybe all of your GoPros at all times are going back to headquarters, and then, very quickly people are putting it together and figuring out what that story is and watching you in real time go through these war zones. I mean, it changes what a journalist can do to get really into a situation, and we should be excited about that, because I think one of the challenges with places that are dangerous are that you have to have so many people there. Look, for any news organization, it's an equation. It's do we want to put that many people in harm's way? And I think one thing I've noticed about journalists is they're out there for that, right? I mean, they want to get the story. They want to tell the story to the world. And when you can have multiple people out there telling stories from different perspectives, I think you've changed the world for the better, because you have given these people so many interesting ways to express themselves. Yeah, I'm excited. I mean, people often ask, why were we acquired by CNN? Why would CNN acquire this little kind of discovery company? And I mean, the party line is always about how personalization can work at CNN. And of course, we're going to do that. It's just an obvious thing to do. But really, part of why they also bought us is that we're kind of the innovative thinking arm. We're always thinking about kind of the next generation kinds of things. The way we're thinking about alerts right now in wearable devices is something that CNN is going to do, and then they're going to apply a lot of the thinking that we got there. So people wonder why we're there, and really it's that. And that's why I'm still there. It's like CNN is a brand that I have a lot of affinity to.
Yeah.
I remember all these events in my life that happened on CNN, so it's really cool to be able to affect this large news organization from this little wing out in San Francisco.
It's funny, GoPro started 200 yards from here in Half Moon Bay, and I didn't even know about it. I found out about it from a CNN camera crew who taught about it, and an NBC camera crew said, we use this on Shark Week. If you see a shark eating a camera, that's a GoPro camera. 'Cause the shark will eat the camera and then spit it back out, and they'll go collect the camera, and they have this killer video of this shark, eating the camera.
With the teeth and everything. Right?
Yeah, it's indestructible. These things are indestructible, really. I mean, you can run them over with a truck almost, and you can get really high quality video off these things. I mean, the video is 4K on these new cameras now.
They're getting up there, yep. Especially with the Blackmagic stuff too.
Yeah. So it's you're carrying around a little camera like that, and all of a sudden you're getting video that CNN would love to buy, or put on the air.
I think it's a challenge for a news organization is when everybody starts getting this video, everybody starts being able to report. I mean, already this kind of happens on Twitter, right? Like when Jeff Zucker, the president of CNN at Fortune Brain Tech about a month ago, he said, hey, I realize people are getting their breaking news first from Twitter and Facebook. And the question is now, how does CNN fit into that ecosystem?
Yeah.
And these are the big questions we're asking. I mean, there was a time the only place you got your breaking news was from CNN. There was a 10-year span where that was the case. And that's clearly changed. And there's still a role for CNN in that ecosystem. And it's up to us to kind of figure out what that role is. So it's we're really it's good that CNN is thinking about this and thinking about the future that closely, because it's easy to put your head in the sand and say no, people always get their breaking news from CNN. But I think that there's an organizational realization that that's not the case.
I'm thinking back to context and sensors and this Internet of Things. There's a sensor out in the bay here that measures wave height. And surfers use it. It tweets every hour, by the way, the wave height. So surfers know whether there's waves and whether to cut out of work early and go surfing, or whether to stay at work. That's context. It's context about what's happening in our world around us. And most of the time it doesn't matter. But once in a while, if there's a killer wave, if there's a tsunami, I want to know that now, so I can get the hell away from here. And CNN's Zeit and CNN are gonna be using sensors like that. Do you have a sense of using the contextual systems that are the Internet of Things that are around us, the sensors that are around us, to bring a new kind of news?
And that's an amazing thought, right? I mean, when you get that far into the future, I mean, we all have sensors on our phones. Like, it's not just the GPS. It's like you're looking at things like temperature. I just saw a crowdsource app the other day that crowdsources temperature based on the temperature of phones around you, right? I mean, there's a lot of sensors that are happening, and I don't think people have fully appreciated that we are going to be layered with sensors in very soon. Fitbit, I mean, right? I mean, this is
this sensor that the president's pilots are wearing is a sleep sensor, but there's a sensor. There's sensors on us, and then there's sensors in the world around us that are studying things about. I'm getting these cube sensors that measure the air quality, and will tell me, is there too much carbon dioxide or too much ozone? Like if I use my printer and I'm breathing too much ozone, it'll warn me.
I mean, it's one of the arguments I've kind of been making within the organization recently is that I think that we need a big data group sitting around, because you are right that when there's a tsunami, you want to know, and it's really interesting to CNN to be the first to know that. The question is, how do you become first in breaking news still? And I think that there's a story here around big data and actually a group of PhDs sitting around CNN helping the reporters know what to cover. And it's not just about mining the social web for a trending topic. Okay, fine. That's
done. There's a team. I know the team at CNN that does that, right?
Right. Yeah. That's figured out. But the question is, like, what are the things that aren't even trendy yet? The things that are just bubbling up, or even more interesting, the thing that bubble that popped that actually is going to be really, really, really important when it happens, like that tsunami sensor. And I think that that's the kind of interesting research that needs to be done in news.
Here's another way to think about breaking news. When the airplane goes down, what's the first thing everybody does? If an airplane fell across the street right now, what would be the first thing you would do?
Turn on CNN.
No, you would look at it.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
If you're around a breaking news story, if there's a gunman in the street, the first thing you do is look at it to figure out. Now, what if 1,000 people in the street all have Google Glass on? They all turn all in sync. If you could have a big data system to know something like that, so extraordinary, that got 1,000 people all to look at the same time in the same spot, now you have a new kind of news.
Or, I mean, you have even a local bump in just... actually, what a lot of people do is they'll check Twitter, they'll check Facebook, they'll check CNN. What if you have a local maxima where there's a bunch of people checking these services, even just on their phone? That might say, hey, there's something really interesting going on here. We don't know what it is yet, but clearly there's something interesting going on.
Twitter knows that.
Twitter knows that,
Because if there's a wreck on the freeway and I'm stopped, the first thing I do is go Highway 92, Half Moon Bay, to see if anybody's tweeted that there's a wreck. And generally there has been. It's amazing how accurate that is. And then you go to Waze and see if anybody else is reporting it. And then all of a sudden Google Maps turns red, and then all of a sudden Waze turns red and there's pictures. I mean, this whole ecosystem of social, local, mobile, wearable computer sensors is really going to change how we get our news, how we make our news, how we find out about our news.
We talk about the web corpus as the primary source of news, and the web corpus is a bunch of somewhere between 400 and 3,000 word stories. And the reality is the way most of us get our news every day is not by reading long-form journalism, it's by reading short-form journalism. And one of the other things that's become a real passion of mine recently is, what does journalism look like? What's the atomic unit of journalism in this new century where you've got sensors and everybody's tweeting data and there's data out there? I don't know what that looks like exactly. I mean, Circa, I think, is really interesting. This mobile news company that's trying to reimagine what news would look like on the phone. I mean, that's one of the reasons I got Google Glass and want to use it is what does news look like here? What is it that I want to see out here that's going to augment my world with the right kind of news information that's going to help me make decisions? And I think we're going to have to change what we report, not just how we report it or how we find it, but what it is that we deliver to people. And I think that's going to be a challenge for news organizations because reporters are used to writing a story. But I think they're going to be reporting facts now. Already they're kind of getting used to this with Twitter, but again, that atomic unit is going to have to change and it's going to have to be expanded and reformatted for all these devices.
Thank you.
Man, this is so exciting.
It's so much. I mean, it's so much. I could talk to you for hours because I'm a journalist. I'm a marketer. I'm interested in wearables. I'm interested in the future, and it's a lot of fun talking to you.
Well, thank you so much.
Where do I follow you on Twitter or Facebook or Google Plus or wherever? And where on CNN are you?
I'm at Philosophy Geek on Twitter. That's where my central hub is. So just check me out there.
Very cool. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Robert.